I often use the following analogy, and we were talking earlier about our respective weight loss and so on. On any given day, one of three things can happen to your weight as a result of the decisions you make that day, the exercise you do, the food that you eat. My weight can go up, my weight can stay the same, or my weight can go down. There isn't another possible state of the world when it comes to my weight. Well, now let's apply that mechanism, that framework, to immigration. So if you let in people in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, into your society, and those people are coming from cultures that have endemic Jew hatred, it's actually definitional to their societies. We know that in a million different ways, but let me just give you one way. Pew surveys demonstrate that when you poll people from those societies, what do you think of the Jews? You get 95 to 99% of polled people that have dismal views of the Jews. Now, just process that.
Even though virtually no Jews live in those places.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not, I mean, if it were 10% of the polled people, that would be a very, difficult number to digest.
Sure.
When it's 95 to 99, so now we let in 500,000 people and assume we go with the 95% rate. Is Jew hatred in the society going to go up? Is it going to stay the same, or is it going to go down? So it didn't require a fancy professor, evolutionary scientist to connect the dots.
Right.
You just had to be wedded to reality.
So speaking of your ecosystem, so you're at Concordia University. It has become like a bizarre hotbed of the Hamas stuff and the yelling at Jewish students or whoever's left. Can't be the most fun place for you to work right now. And what do you think has happened at that university?
So you may or may not know this, but well before October 7th, I'm talking for the past 20 years, my university colloquially has been referred to as Gaza University.
Yeah, I've heard you say.
Yeah, right. So in 2002, Netanyahu was stopped, maybe one of the early cancel culture victims. He was supposed to come and speak at Concordia. They shut him down, Prime Minister of Israel. So really the reality is that it's just a reflection of the demographic situation at Concordia, which is there is an increasing number of students who come from those particular cultures and that particular religious heritage. And as those numbers increase, it becomes more difficult to be Jewish at that university, and certainly to be a outspoken public Jewish person, right? I mean, some students will come up to me privately and say, hey, professor, I'm Jewish. I don't wear the Star of David. But the reality is, if that's what they're afraid of, they take off the Star of David. Nobody knows that they're Jewish. But if I walk in on campus, most people know who I am. So it's become an almost impossible situation. Luckily, this semester, I'm on sabbatical. So I have a bit of a reprieve, but September is coming around. I don't know how I'm going to go back.
Yeah, I mean, well, how are you going to go back? Because you live in Montreal. I mean, I'm seeing these protests. They're pretty intense there. You have a government backed by Trudeau that certainly is not going to do anything to curb any of this. Yeah. I would say actually is fueling an awful lot of it. I mean, just personally, for someone that cares about happiness and family and all that as much as you do, like it's not easy. And you don't have the easiest family history.
Exactly.
And so biography.
I'll give you an example that just happened about 2 weeks ago. We were talking earlier about Inter Miami and our common friend Jorge Mas. Well, he was kind enough to send me tickets for Inter Miami had come to Montreal to play a game. He couldn't make it, and so I took my family to the game as a beautiful gift from him. As we were driving to get to the stadium, we crossed about a 6 to 8 block area where it was impossible for you to know whether it was in Raqqa, Syria, whether it was in Yemen, whether it was in Pakistan. It was just an endless sea of what looked like very hostile protesters and demonstrators and so on. And I remember that I sort of tried to put the visor so that people don't see me, because I was worried, what if someone recognizes me and they have... So that's the reality. Now, it didn't take long, right? I mean, 10, 15 years ago, I was already warning people that this was coming. Well, now we're there. What if I was just walking with my family and they recognized me? Who knows what would have happened to me?
Right. I drove by one when I did our conference in London. That was late November.
Right.
And I had the same exact thought, which was, if I get recognized right now, I don't know, do they literally just ransack the car? Like, what the hell happens? All right. So you're in the middle of that in Canada, but are there any mechanisms for Canada to not fully go that route. You guys have let in an awful amount of people, an awful lot of people. It doesn't seem like there's anything to stop.
Right.
So it's sort of what I asked you before, but I mean, from a Canadian perspective, it's like you guys are so damn nice.
Yeah.
You're just going to fall on the sword.
Suicidal empathy, the topic of my next book.
Look, that's literally the title of the next book,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. So look, I often use the following analogy, and we were talking earlier about our respective weight loss and so on. On any given day, one of three things can happen to your weight as a result of the decisions you make that day, the exercise you do, the food that you eat. My weight can go up, my weight can stay the same, or my weight can go down. There isn't another possible state of the world when it comes to my weight. Well, now let's apply that mechanism, that framework, to immigration. So if you let in people in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, into your society, and those people are coming from cultures that have endemic Jew hatred, it's actually definitional to their societies. We know that in a million different ways, but let me just give you one way. Pew surveys demonstrate that when you poll people from those societies, what do you think of the Jews? You get 95 to 99% of polled people that have dismal views of the Jews. Now, just process that.
Even though virtually no Jews live in those places.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not, I mean, if it were 10% of the polled people, that would be a very, difficult number to digest.
Sure.
When it's 95 to 99, so now we let in 500,000 people and assume we go with the 95% rate. Is Jew hatred in the society going to go up? Is it going to stay the same, or is it going to go down? So it didn't require a fancy professor, evolutionary scientist to connect the dots.
Right.
You just had to be wedded to reality.
But is the brazenness of the protests and the things that they're screaming for, and then the way they use words in Arabic that can be sort of defined either way, or river to the sea doesn't exactly mean destroy Israel. Like it's the way they're doing everything that's quite duplicitous and to some extent deserves credit because they're fooling an awful lot of people.
And that comes from the confidence of now having strength in numbers, right? When you're 0 to 2%, or you're just a exotic minority, when you're 3 to 5%, you start being a bit more emboldened in your political demands. When you 6 to 10%. And so there is kind of a trajectory in the exact same way that a physician can tell you with very, very clear accuracy what is the trajectory of having diabetes, what's going to happen with very clear timeline. The same thing applies when a society is getting Islamized. Now, again, I hate to do this prefacing, many Muslims are lovely, and I know more Muslims who are my friends than most people will ever meet. We're not talking about individual Muslims. We're talking about, does Islam, once it takes a hold in a society, does it promote greater liberties, greater individual dignity? If you own black dogs and you're a gay Jew, should you feel more? And the reason why I say black dog, because
my dog's tan,
but he's not black, so he's a bit safer. But Muhammad had a particular repulsion towards dogs in general, but black dogs in particular. So it doesn't take much to realize what's going to happen. I have many Muslim friends who will tell me that they're concerned about the rate at which many of these societies are getting Islamized. They escaped those societies, and now they find themselves amidst the same societies from which they escaped.
So I guess I suspect I know the answer to this, but you've told your biography many times in many different places,
sure.
And we'll link to the original story that you told from many, many years ago. But growing up in Lebanon, Jewish family, Christian Lebanon. I mean, it was largely Christian at the time.
Right.
It's not. I think it was about 80% Christian at the time, right?
Maybe a bit less. Maybe 65,
something around there.
Yeah.
Now it's I think now it's about 80% Muslim. So it's basically done this bizarre flip. But do you remember? Was the feeling the same? Do you think if I was talking to your dad in Lebanon in give me a year. 72, as he was watching the turn, is that sort of what you're describing right now in your country, or maybe in my country?
Absolutely. So in people have the wrong understanding of tolerance in the Middle East. You're tolerated until you're no longer tolerated, right? You're healthy until you drop dead of a heart attack, right? 5 minutes ago, you were smiling and now you're dead. So the concept of toleration or tolerance in the Middle East simply means that, yes, we're not going to execute you today and you can thrive and live for 30 years, but be quiet. Don't wear the Star of David too big. And then maybe one day one of us will have designs for your beautiful daughter, and when we come knocking, don't scream too loud when we take her. So that's what it means to coexist in the Middle East. Even in the golden era of Andalusia, you may have heard that, right, where Christians, Muslims, and Jews were supposed to walk hand in hand singing John Lennon, Imagine. That's not really what happened, right? Jews were dhimmis, right? They're third-class citizens. That doesn't mean that they are exterminated every day, all day long, but it means that you don't know when the beheadings are coming. It could be tomorrow, or it could be in 5 years, or it could be in 50 years, but they will be coming, right? And so in the context of us growing up in Lebanon, I tell of many stories, and I'm happy to repeat some of them if you'd like, of what I saw growing up in tolerant, progressive, modern, Paris of the Middle East, Lebanon. So when I was 5 years old, Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was the president of Egypt, who was very much revered and loved in the Arab world because he was a pan-Arabist. He was trying to unite all of the Arabic countries. Very charismatic, kind of populist. When he passed away in 1970, I hadn't yet turned 6. There were demonstrations in the streets, as often happens in the Middle East. Everybody's lamenting to God, why? And as they're proceeding down my street, they're screaming, death to Jews, death to Jews. And as a young boy, I was horrified. I'm asking my mother, why are they screaming death to Jews? We have nothing to do with this. So that's one story. A second story, I'll tell 2 other quick ones.
It's Lebanon 1972 or Concordia 2024.
Exactly right. I was about 8 or 9, so this would be about 1973, 74, about a year before the Civil War started. The teacher asks us in class to each get up and tell the class what we want to be when we grow up. I want to be a soccer player. I want to be a policeman. I want to be a nurse. And one of the kids, and I still have a photo and I can point to that kid, gets up and says, when I grow up, I want to be a Jew killer, to the raucous applause and laughter of all the kids who knew that I was Jewish, right?
Were you the only Jew in the class?
There was another one that I can remember. But of course, we're a small minority. And it wasn't a secret that we were Jewish, because you just had to go to the synagogue on Saturday and you would know who's Jewish, but you certainly didn't advertise it, loudly. My brother was Lebanese champion in judo for many years in a row. And it had become a bit of a shameful reality for a Jew to constantly be winning these combat sports. So he was visited by some men who said that it was time for him to retire, lest there might be an unfortunate accident that happens to him. So he ended up moving to France to pursue his judo career. This is before the Civil War. And then, incredibly, ironically, in 1976, he ended up representing Lebanon in the Montreal Olympics. So he was too Jewish to stay in Lebanon in 1973-74, but then we're going to overlook you being Jewish so that you can have the flag of Lebanon. So that was the reality.
And now there's none left in Lebanon.
So I've heard there's 10. About 40.
Okay.
Some say 10, some say 90, but they're not practicing Jews, right? There's no minyan, it's just some Jew got married in 1963 to a Muslim woman, and he stayed back in Lebanon.
If you're looking for smarter conversations about academia, check out our academia playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.